Hello, and welcome to Cry Havoc Wargaming, dedicated to bringing you the uncommon. For those of you who haven't met me, my name is Ron, and today we're going to talk about Pulp Alley and altering its rules for other games. So let's get started. So last week in the video that you'll see posted just here, I asked if people were interested in me covering some Pulp Alley games in less common pulp periods, or not even in a pulp fashion at all, but as normal historic games. And I got a bit of feedback on that already by the filming of this video. But one particular comment really intrigued me, and therefore I've decided to produce this video this week rather than I was planning on doing a historic game this week. But I'm putting that off a little bit, partly because I've got a bunch of figures to paint, but also because I was really intrigued by the thought of this. And I apologize that I do not know how your name is pronounced, but it'll be written right down here on the lower third. The basic comment was that this person was interested in using the game for playing 1930s or 40s whodunit stories. And that really intrigued me to think about how to manipulate the game for that kind of world. I came up with some ideas or thoughts of what I would do, but it was too complicated just to put down in a comment section as a reply. So I decided to do this video with some of my thoughts on how I would do that if I was to consider doing that. I'm not saying these are the only ways to do it. In fact, I hope that if any of you have ideas of what you would do to convert the game to this sort of play style or genre, that you might include those in the comments down below. Also, Dave, if you happen to be watching this video, I hope you'll input your input as the author of the game down below. Here's a few things I thought about. First off, what do you mean by whodunits? And so I'm imagining that we're talking about a lot of those classics of the film noir period, those kind of works that were done by Dashiell Hammett or Raymond Chandler, things like the movie The Big Sleep. Maybe not. Maybe you're looking at more of a Agatha Christie sort of arrangement where there's some murder and there's a whole bunch of suspects and they all combine in a room at the end in a parlor and decide who did it. Not sure which. But either way, you're looking at games that are going to involve a lot less combat than what the game normally calls for, and a whole lot more deduction. Right off the bat, I think in most cases the way I would probably run a game like this, well, the very first thing is you have to decide whether you're going to do it as a campaign or as a game. The campaign would have the advantage, and again I'm thinking with the campaign more like something along the lines of Dashiell Hammett or Raymond Chandler, which each of the scenes that takes the story further to its eventual plot could be its own adventure, and therefore you can really change the feel and the location of those sites. In either case, I don't think you're usually going to find that this genre works well on a little 3x3 table, but having a few tables, maybe the Agatha Christie might, where you might have that table being a mansion. And there is an excellent mansion available through Sally Forth. But say a Dashiell Hammett story, they take place in different places, offices, warehouses, out on the street, very often climaxing at some home, somebody's residence or something. So with that kind of thought in mind, that would really make, I think, more for a campaign than it might be for a one-off adventure. But either way, that's one of the things you're going to first need to decide what you're going to do. Then if you're really pushing the mystery aspect, the whodunit aspect of it, what I'd be looking at would be a two-player situation, which it sounds like what you were looking for, because I think the original post was a wife and husband. And I think what you'd want to do in that case is have somebody act as a game master. If the goal is to actually solve a real mystery, then you have to have a mystery, and both players, it's not going to be very successful if both players actually know the mystery or know the answer to the mystery. So I think the obvious way to do it would be to do it as a game master who runs the game, who is responsible for the actions of all of your NPCs, and is basically unfolding and telling the story to the other player who's playing a solo or individual league in the game. That's something I would very strongly consider. The alternative to that, though, and I've got it here next to me, I have the PDF version, would be something like what they did with Vice Alley. Vice Alley isn't really going to answer your needs for this particular case, because Vice Alley is set in that period, but it's far more of a pulpy crime-fighting situation. I mean, you could make it a little bit more realistic by playing it just FBI agents or the police against the bad guys, but the main bad guy, the Spectre, is a little over the top for a more realistic criminal game, and it's really built more around the idea of the vigilante type, the Daredevil or early Batman or that sort of thing. You don't have to play that as your law-abiding side, but the villain is more on that science fiction-y futuristic version. But I bring up the game not because of it being an excellent example of meeting the genre that you're asking about, but because the game, the mystery isn't actually decided. You're not really trying to resolve the mystery in the normal sense of the game. You can't get to the last adventure and actually defeat the Spectre, that's the bad guy in the game, until you've done a certain other numbers of adventures, assuming that you're getting the clues that lead you to the person by doing that. So that's one way you could do this, and where both players could play, is where you're not actually solving it. The characters are solving the mystery, the players aren't. I guess that's the way to say it. In fact, in Vice Alley, the players decide on their own at the end who the Spectre actually was. The game hasn't ever decided it. So that's one way to do it, is you play a series, particularly the campaign, is you play a series of adventures, and the rewards that you get for taking the plot points in those games take you just that much closer to solving the end result. But if you do want it to be about the mystery, then I think the goal is to have a game master who creates the mystery, decides what the clues are, and basically those clues are used as hints for the players to try to decide who the baddie is or who the culprit is. More like an actual whodunit. Unfortunately, it's not a board game or tabletop game, but Call of Cthulhu by Chaosium was a game that was very well designed. It's a role-playing game, but it's about solving mysteries, and it worked along those lines as well. But it also used the characters' mental statistics to help them. So it wasn't just the players having to resolve issues. One of the challenges, of course, with any game, it's really hard to get players to play a dumb character dumbly. It's hard to get players to play like they're less intelligent than they really are. But it's impossible to get players to play as more intelligent than they are. And the way to get around that is by using mental statistics. So you could actually help, as a game master, you could give hints to the characters by having them do successful rolls on their stats, and then deciding what information to give them based on that. So I think you could do a conventional real whodunit where you've actually created a complicated mystery by using that kind of merge of the rules. Let them find clues to the plot points, then give them rolls on their various mental stats that will help them decide what these clues mean towards getting them to the end result. Just my thoughts on the subject. So I mentioned the plot points. The plot points are important for another reason. Typically in film noir, the combat is a lot less than you're going to find in a normal pulp game. So I think one of the things you'd want to do is adopt, many of the scenarios have a rule that either prohibits any gunfire or combat action, or it very limits it, or has a chance, like some of the China Station, the last flight out of Casablanca in Perilous Island, they have the possibility of raising police or crowds against you if you take combat actions. Since these men in typical film noir are involved in the regular world, there's violence often in these stories, but the violence is usually less, and it's often more concealed. It's often private is really what I mean, more private than concealed. And I think that's already duplicated or allowed for by the Pulp Alley situation. You know, if you have to get past a guard to get into a building, or who is watching one of the clues or something like that, you simply make him a plot point. And then the challenge, the peril you're playing in approaching the plot point, that is the violence. That's the guard shooting at you, or you having to use might to take the guard down so you can get the information you're after. So it does allow for the level of violence that would be in that genre as opposed to what's in a normal pulp game. I think that would be represented pretty well. I like the idea, I mentioned the campaign, I really like the idea of doing your thought as a campaign, where each adventure is taking the story a little further along, a little further into the depth, and then that gives you the perfect example of having your final adventure being that, what in a video game they'd call the boss battle, where you actually confront the villain of the story. I would consider not playing multiple leagues unless you're using a predetermined or rolled random sort of adventure or mystery instead of a well-designed, previously created mystery. I would create restrictions on violence and some negative effects if violence is being openly used. I would certainly consider doing a lot of it because it is film noir. Doing it at night and using the 12-inch restrictions for line of sight, and relying heavily on your plot points to take the mystery further along, to get you to the point, and to allow for the violence in the game. You could use some NPCs as well. It doesn't have to all be plot points, but you could put some NPC police in, or NPC thugs are helping to defend the item. I should probably mention, when I mentioned the plot points too, I also believe that you should consider the idea, because you're using them as clues, you might want to think about using the rewards as no drop, because it's the information that's important, not the actual item in many cases, or maybe a mixture of both could be used. The pulp battle section, they talk about the possibility of using no drop rewards whenever you defeat an opponent. That's something I would consider possibly using too if you are using NPC baddies, is to use that to take your mystery a little further along. I think that's pretty much it. I think I've covered everything. Maybe something will come to mind later, but these are all thoughts I have and things that I think might help you with that idea. If anybody else has ideas that they have on what they think would be interesting to alter or adjust Pulp Alley for a whodunit mystery sort of game, I hope you'll include those in the comment section down below. Also, if you have any questions or ideas for further content that you'd like to see presented here on Cry Havoc Wargaming, we look for those in the comment section down below as well. If you've enjoyed this video and found it all useful, I hope you'll go ahead and hit like. And if you'd like to receive further videos to help guide you on how to better spend your money or time in your tabletop wargaming hobby, then please hit subscribe and ring our notification bell. Till next time, cheers.